Class, this is Dr. Gutierrez. I'm going to review some more information about developing research questions, and hopefully after this video you will feel a little bit more comfortable, right? So let's go ahead and begin, and I'm going to give two examples of one that's a more quantitative focus and then another one that's more of a qualitative focus. So just to recall, a quantitative research design is really more number-based. It's really looking at experimental design and surveys and those kinds of things. When you're looking for the attitudes, information, demographics, all those kinds of things, or whether how one intervention affects the independent variable affects an outcome or with a prediction. Qualitative has to do more with the field, basically in the field, and reviewing how those lived experiences that those individuals have can shape either different outcomes or just understanding those individuals that are participating in that study. So let's go ahead and begin here. So if you go to your research handbook actually, and it is should be page 18, all right, of your research handbook, and let me just kind of make sure here. Actually, if you go to page 16 right here, it says finding a focus for your research inquiry. So some initial concerns, sometimes people feel like, oh, well, it might be too narrow or it might be too broad. You want to go with more of the narrow, because remember, you're not trying to cure cancer. You're not trying to do this extreme thing, because those things take years, and you really have to do something known as longitudinal studies, and those are where you actually study certain populations throughout the year, and it's the same population, and they take many years. You have to have several trials and those kinds of things. And obviously for this course you're just trying to develop your research questions. I believe with the next course you're going to look at more of your literature review, your purpose and your literature review, and then your capstone, right? So you could eventually use the information from this course to publish something, or you can maybe roll it over for your doctorate level coursework. Okay, so going right over here to page 18, guide steps for framing and refining a research question. So again, you want to identify a topic, which you did in your previous course, a specific issue of interest for the topic. Okay, so we know special education, so what in special education? Maybe it's the writing process, maybe it's math. So here it gives you an example, the writing process strategy of editing for spelling, helping my students increase their independence and sense of valuing their editing for spelling. So that's the interest and that's the topic. Now, you're going to put that topic in a specific context. So I want you to think and just jot down, take a sheet of paper, jot down the different types of contexts or settings that you've experienced. So maybe it's in a push-in model, at the elementary level. Maybe it is in an inclusion model at the middle school. Maybe it is within a supportive co-teaching environment. Maybe it is in a team teaching environment of co-teaching. And so, there's 4 different models of co-teaching, so maybe you can choose one of those. Or you can go by grade level as well. So here in the example here, they put here 5th graders, boys and girls, and then they went on to explain a little bit more about them. Diverse cultural backgrounds in their language arts program, working with daily writing journals, and using personal editing checklists. Now you want to set up your orientation. So the focus of the study. Is the focus of the study going to be on the students? Are you going to survey the students? Are you going to interview the students? Are you going to observe the students? Or is it going to be the parents? Is it going to be the administrators? Is it going to be new special education teachers? It depends what focus you want to put on staff and those kinds of things. So looking at this example here, it says 5th grade students, and then also the support roles for the teacher in developing that editing checklist for writing. And then you're going to apply categories with a what kinds of questions. So think of, for example, benefits, variations, problems, differences, awareness, supports, signs of growth, signs of strengths, all of those kinds of things to develop your questions. And first, what I would recommend is write down the questions at first. Later on, you can refine them, and what it ends up happening is, you can take away some questions. You can actually consolidate some questions as well, and some of those other questions can become sub-questions to the overarching question. Okay, I'm going to give you a few examples. Okay, and here, if you notice, here is, sorry, where is it? Right here. One example, personal editing checklists with my fifth graders as a way to increase their independence and sense of valuing for editing. So you could create a question, does, personal editing checklists, for my fifth grade students increase their independence and sense of valuing for editing, right? And then you can talk about, how that checklist, actually does that. What's one way that you're able to find that information? Well, you can do it through surveys, you can do it through work samples, or if you're doing more of a qualitative approach, you can do observations, you can do something known as document analysis, where you're analyzing their work samples, and then you're also doing interviews as well, interviewing the students, maybe even possibly interviewing the teachers as well. And then you can have possible sub-questions underneath this overarching question. Okay, so one example, and let me see if I can put it, just thought of something here. Let me see if I can write in here that lets me write. Okay, so using that model, and let me go to, oh, here it is. So using that model, let's kind of go through one. So identify a topic. Let's say, for example, you want to work on an accommodation, okay, to see if this particular accommodation, or you can even do a skills class, but let's just do it in accommodation. This particular accommodation is helpful to students or not. So we will go with, let's try extra time. Let's try that one. Extra time. This is just an example. The accommodation of extra time. Okay, helping my students, okay, improve or actually demonstrate their math abilities. So you're really looking to see, does this accommodation of extra time allow or help my students in demonstrating, their math abilities, right? Because now that they have this extra time, will they be able to, show that they actually understand the knowledge, or is it just not a helpful accommodation? All right, and then for this part, you can put, you can put 7th grade, let's say 7th grade, okay, 7th graders in a regular push-in model. Okay, and I'm just jotting things down. Push-in math model. All right, and we do have the accommodation, which is extra time, right? Okay, now I'm going to put that here. And it's okay wherever it goes here, is just as long as you have it down here. Extra time as an accommodation. And then right here, set up your orientation. Who is in the focus? Okay, so here we're setting it up. So we're going to, 7th graders. And I'm going to put, let's put boys with learning disabilities from cultural backgrounds. All right, and in their general ed math class. Working with co-teachers and using extra time as an accommodation. All right. So now, as you can see, this can actually be set up as a major question, right? So for example, how do 7th graders boys with learning disabilities from cultural backgrounds in their general education math class, working with co-teachers, use extra time as an accommodation? Okay, that could be one question. Or you can say, how do 7th graders, boys with learning disabilities from cultural backgrounds in general ed math class working with co-teachers, demonstrate their learning with the accommodation of extra time, or something like along those lines. Okay, so a lot of this is, really working at it, massaging it, changing things, writing it down, and then trying to make sure that it makes sense, right? So then you can go on to say, what are the varied benefits and concerns for my 7th graders in the math class in using extra time as an accommodation? And then what different types of teacher supports are needed to help my 7th graders in implementing this accommodation, right? And then what varied kinds of active roles can my 7th graders take in ensuring that they are implementing this accommodation with fidelity? For example, asking their teacher to implement it for them, being self-advocate for that, for themselves, making sure that they're monitoring their time, right, while they're taking the tests and not just sitting there. A lot of times students that do have this accommodation, sometimes they just kind of sit there and then you go back and they're still there, and they haven't really moved a lot. So looking at that. And I do want to mention that you can create something with an overarching question, and then you can have sub-questions. And then your sub-questions can be, for example, what are the attitudes that teachers have with extra time as an accommodation, right? What are the benefits that students see with accommodations? And so then you can conduct surveys to the various groups to find this information. So what I wanted to just point out that this would be more of a quantitative, okay, because you're really looking at attitudes, and you're really looking at how how is it that they're able to do something, with this accommodation, this intervention, this independent variable that's actually your accommodation. Now, if we were to do a qualitative approach, okay, it would be a little bit different. Okay, so if I was to scroll down here, this is right here is just giving you some different possible ways to frame your different questions on a specific topic. So it gives you more options in making your overarching research question and your sub-questions. So I'll let you look at that. Okay, what are the benefits and concerns in implementing extra time as an accommodation as one specific strategy to support and help my 7th graders increase their math skills, or something like along those lines, or math capabilities or abilities. So if I was to do something like a qualitative, okay, I'm looking at more the beliefs, I'm looking at more at the perceptions, I'm looking at more of the lived experiences of the individuals that I'm actually observing and analyzing. Okay, so it would be something like again, special ed. So we'll keep with the same topic, special education. And we're going to do inclusion. See if I can get down here. So we'll do inclusion. And, sorry. And for the specific context, we'll do 7th graders. And we'll do extra time as an accommodation. Time as an accommodation. All right. So maybe a possible research question could be, for a more qualitative design, what are the co-teachers and students' perceptions of extra time as an accommodation? Within a co-teaching context at blank school. Okay, something like that. So this could be an overarching research question, more of a qualitative research question. What are the co-teachers and students' perceptions of extra time as an accommodation within a co-teaching context at such and such school? And then your sub-questions would be, uh, what are the co-teachers' perceptions of this accommodation? What are the students' perceptions of this accommodation? And you can also um, have a sub-question on, how does the co-teaching model impact the implementation of extra time as an accommodation? Okay, that could be another sub-question as well. So see how they all relate to the overarching question of what are the co-teachers and students' perceptions of extra time as an accommodation within a co-teaching context at blank school. So you would have the various, for your subgroups, it could be your co-teachers, it could be your students, and then it could also be how does the context of the co-teaching environment impact their learning opportunities. Okay, and again, how would you get this information? You would get it through observations and writing down everything on the observations. You would also obtain this information through field work, which is focus groups from the teachers in interviewing them, and then also work document analysis. So analyzing the work samples to see that extra time is being implemented with fidelity, and that it is helpful for students. So matching what the students are saying that it is helpful, let's say, well, let's see if in the work sample it actually shows that when you received extra time it was helpful and you did benefit from it and you got an okay grade. So looking at those types of things, I really would encourage you to play around with this tool here. So you're going to go to Research Handbook, and this is found in the course resources in Blackboard, and it's pages 18. Sorry, you can actually start in page 16. So pages 16 to about page 24. And just practice filling out this sheet, and you will see that you will be able to refine your research question very thoroughly.